First contact in the void. Commander Diana Wells had seen many strange things during her 15 years patrolling the Outer Rim, but nothing quite like this. The crystalline escape pod drifted silently through the star-speckled void, its surface catching and refracting light in mesmerizing patterns. According to the USS Starweaver's sensors, it had been adrift for nearly 3 months. "Life signs confirmed, Commander," reported Lieutenant Raj Patel from his station. "But they're unusual. The pattern doesn't match anything in our database." Diana straightened her uniform, dark eyes fixed on the mysterious vessel. "Define unusual, Lieutenant." "The signatures suggest crystalline-based life, similar to the luminar species, but far more complex. And," he hesitated, "they're degrading rapidly." That made the decision for her. "Prep Medical Bay 3. Lieutenant Joe, extend our shields around the pod. Let's bring it in." The recovery operation went smoothly, too smoothly, Diana thought. Escape pods of unknown origin usually triggered at least half a dozen security protocols. This one seemed almost eager to be rescued, its systems interfacing seamlessly with the Starweaver's docking mechanisms. When the pod's outer shell dissolved, revealing its occupant, Diana understood why. Curled in what appeared to be a hibernation chamber was a child, a crystalline being no larger than a human toddler. Its translucent body pulsed with weak inner light, fractals of color dancing beneath its surface. Dr. Olivia Blackwood, the ship's xenobiologist, rushed forward with her scanners. "Remarkable. Its cellular structure is unlike anything I've seen. The crystalline matrix is clearly artificial, but the consciousness within—" She looked up at Diana, eyes wide. "It's a hybrid. Someone engineered this child to house an energy-based consciousness within a crystalline form." The child stirred, its surface rippling with patterns of distress. Diana knelt beside the chamber, keeping her voice soft. "You're safe now, little one. We're here to help." The being's response came not in words, but in images, projected directly into their minds. Flashes of a sterile laboratory, of cold voices discussing imperfect resonance patterns, of a desperate caretaker launching the escape pod just before being discovered. "They were going to terminate it," Dr. Blackwood whispered, horror evident in her voice, "because its crystalline structure couldn't maintain the perfect harmonics their society demands." Diana felt her jaw tighten. In her years of service, she'd encountered too many species who valued perfection over compassion. "Well, that's not happening on my watch. Doctor, can you stabilize its condition?" "Yes, but—" Olivia hesitated. "Commander, if this child is from where I think it is, the crystalline hierarchy harboring it could be considered an act of war. They're extremely protective of their genetic purity." Diana watched as the child's inner light pulsed in time with her own heartbeat, its surface reflecting her image back at her. In that reflection, she saw not just herself, but everything humanity stood for: compassion, protection of the innocent, the courage to do what was right despite the consequences. "Log it as a standard refugee rescue," she ordered. "Under Galactic Law Article 47, we're obligated to provide sanctuary to any being fleeing persecution. Contact Command and inform them we'll be making a slight detour to Station Delta for additional medical supplies." She smiled at the crystalline child, who had begun to emit a soft, musical hum. "Our new friend here needs time to heal before we make any long-term decisions." As the medical team prepared to transfer their unusual patient to sick bay, Diana caught Lieutenant Patel grinning. "Something amusing, Lieutenant." "Just thinking, Commander. The hierarchy spends centuries perfecting their crystalline resonance, and here's this child, making more beautiful music by accident than I've ever heard from their formal choruses." Diana nodded, watching as the child reached out with a glowing appendage to touch the doctor's hand, sending sparkles of light dancing across the ceiling. "Sometimes the most beautiful songs are the ones we never expected to hear, Lieutenant. Let's make sure this one has a chance to be heard." Little did Diana know that this single act of compassion would set in motion events that would challenge not just the crystalline hierarchy's beliefs, but the very foundations of how different species could learn to understand and accept each other across the vast expanse of space. Breaking protocol. 3 days into their journey to Station Delta, Commander Diana Wells stood in Medical Bay 3, watching the crystalline child suspend small objects in midair through some form of energy manipulation. Dr. Blackwood had started calling the child Echo, after noticing how it could perfectly mirror and amplify the ship's harmonic frequencies. Echo's cellular regeneration is remarkable, Dr. Blackwood reported, gesturing to the holographic displays showing the child's internal structure. The imperfections the hierarchy deemed worthy of termination, they're not flaws at all. Echo's crystalline matrix is actually more complex than their standard templates. Diana watched as Echo created intricate patterns of light and energy, transforming the sterile medical bay into a dance of colors. Any progress on communication? More than we expected, Lieutenant Patel interjected, entering with his latest analysis. Echo's been learning our computer systems at an exponential rate. The universal translator is starting to decode the energy patterns into coherent thoughts. A soft chime from the ship's comm system interrupted them. "Commander," Lieutenant Joe's voice carried an edge of tension. "Priority transmission from hierarchy space. They're demanding to speak with you." Diana straightened her uniform. "Route it to the medical bay." She turned to Echo, who had stopped playing and drawn closer to Dr. Blackwood. "Stay calm, little one. Nobody's taking you anywhere." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a towering crystalline being whose faceted surface reflected countless images of the transmission. High resonator Sci-Fi of the crystalline hierarchy managed to look down at Diana, despite the video feed being eye-level. "Commander Wells," the crystalline being's voice created harmonic overtones that made the medical equipment vibrate. "Our sensors detected an unauthorized launch from research facility Gamma 987 cycles ago. The escape pod's beacon has led us to your vessel." Diana kept her voice steady. "High resonator, we recovered an abandoned pod containing a child, under galactic law." "That specimen is hierarchy property," Sci-Fi interrupted. "It represents decades of genetic engineering, and its continued existence threatens the purity of our resonance patterns. You will return it immediately." Behind Diana, Echo pressed against Dr. Blackwood's leg, projecting images of the research facility of other children being decommissioned for minor variations in their crystal structures. The doctor's face paled at the visions. "With respect, High Resonator," Diana's voice took on a steel edge, "Echo has demonstrated sentience and requested asylum. The Harmony Accords, which your people signed, protect the rights of all sentient beings regardless of origin." Sci-Fi's surface darkened. "Commander, you name that thing as if it were a person. It is a failed experiment, nothing more. The hierarchy will not be lectured on laws by lesser species who lack the capacity to understand perfection." Lieutenant Patel's console suddenly lit up with warnings. "Commander, they're charging weapons. 3 hierarchy vessels just dropped out of hyperspace." Diana didn't flinch. "High Resonator, firing on a Federation vessel would violate at least 6 interstellar treaties. Are you certain you wish to proceed?" "You forget your place, Commander." Sci-Fi's form grew brighter with barely contained energy. "The hierarchy's pursuit of perfection will not be impeded by misguided sentiment. You have 6 hours to surrender the specimen, or we will take it by force." The transmission cut off. In the silence that followed, Echo moved to Diana's side and touched her hand. Images flowed between them, not of fear or the research facility this time, but of the Starweaver's crew, of Diana herself, of safety and kindness and acceptance. "Lieutenant Patel," Diana said quietly, "send a priority message to command. Inform them of our situation and request immediate backup." She knelt beside Echo. "But make it clear we're not surrendering anyone." "The hierarchy doesn't bluff, Commander," Dr. Blackwood warned. "Their ships outgun us 3-1. Diana smiled grimly. "No, but they do underestimate lesser species." "Lieutenant Patel, how's your progress on decoding Echo's energy manipulation abilities?" "Nearly complete. The patterns are complex but consistent. With Echo's help, we might be able to—" His eyes widened as he understood. "Commander, that's incredibly risky." "Riskier than facing 3 hierarchy warships." Diana raised an eyebrow. "Doctor, work with Patel. If Echo can manipulate energy fields on a small scale, let's see if we can amplify that ability through our shield generators. The hierarchy wants perfection. Let's show them what imperfection can do. As her crew rushed to prepare, Diana watched Echo return to its suspended light display, but now the patterns had changed. They weren't random anymore. They were precise mathematical models of shield harmonics and energy flows. The very flaws the hierarchy had condemned might prove to be their salvation. 6 hours, Diana murmured. Let's make them count. Hidden talents. Time was running out. With just 3 hours remaining before the hierarchy's deadline, the USS Starweaver's engineering bay had transformed into an improvised research lab. Lieutenant Patel and Dr. Blackwood worked frantically at their stations, while Echo hovered near the ship's main power core, its crystalline form pulsing with increasing intensity. Remarkable, Dr. Blackwood muttered, studying the readings. Echo isn't just manipulating energy fields, it's harmonizing with them, creating resonance patterns that shouldn't be possible according to standard physics. Commander Diana Wells paced the chamber, her normally composed demeanor showing hints of strain. Can we use it? Better than that, Patel replied, excitement breaking through his professional tone. Echo's shown us something revolutionary, the hierarchy's obsession with perfect crystalline structures. It's actually limiting their potential. Echo's imperfect matrix allows for adaptive resonance. It can sync with and enhance any energy frequency. A sudden surge of power caused the lights to flicker. Echo had moved closer to the core, its body now glowing with brilliant colors. Images flooded their minds, complex mathematical equations, wave patterns, and something else, a sense of purpose, of wanting to protect. Commander, Joe's voice came through the comm, hierarchy vessels are moving into attack formation. Their weapons are charged. Wait. There was a pause. We're detecting unusual energy readings from their ships, some kind of interference with their crystal-based systems. Diana turned to Echo, who was now projecting a detailed holographic display of the 3 hierarchy ships. Within the projection, subtle waves of energy pulsed between the vessels, highlighting vulnerabilities in their crystalline technology. Echo understands their weaknesses, Dr. Blackwood breathed, because it was meant to be one of them. Commander, Lieutenant Joe's voice carried newfound urgency. 2 more ships just dropped out of hyperspace. Diana's heart sank, but before she could respond, Patel laughed. Federation signatures, Commander, the Dauntless and the Endeavor. Captain Marcus sends his regards and says, thought you might want some company for negotiations. Relief flooded through Diana, but she kept her voice steady. Perfect timing. Lieutenant Joe, open a channel to all ships, including our hierarchy friends. She straightened her uniform and nodded to Echo, who moved to her side, still glowing with potential energy. This is Commander Wells of the USS Starweaver. High Resonator Cymix, I trust you can see that the tactical situation has changed. I propose we discuss this like civilized beings. The response came in a cascade of harmonic frequencies that made the deck plates vibrate. You only delay the inevitable, Commander. The specimen must be returned. Its existence threatens everything we have built. No, Diana replied firmly. What threatens your society is your own rigid definition of perfection. She gestured to Echo, who stepped forward. Echo, show them. The crystalline child raised its faceted arms, and suddenly every display on every ship lit up with complex energy patterns, the same ones Echo had been studying. Through their shared mental connection, Diana understood what they were seeing. A new way of manipulating crystalline matrices, one that allowed for adaptation and growth rather than static perfection. Impossible, Cymix's voice had lost its harmonic certainty. These patterns, they defy all established resonance laws. They defy your laws, Diana corrected. Because your laws are based on a flawed premise, that perfection means uniformity. Echo isn't a failed experiment. It's the next step in your species' evolution. Through the ship's sensors, they could see the hierarchy vessel's crews reacting to Echo's demonstration. Their own crystalline forms flickered with new possibilities, resonating with frequencies they had been engineered to suppress. Your society values harmony above all else, Diana continued. But true harmony isn't about forcing everyone to sing the same note. It's about finding beauty in how different notes come together. She placed a hand on Echo's shoulder, feeling the warm pulse of energy beneath its surface. Echo can teach your people things you never imagined possible, not because it's perfect, but because it's different. The silence that followed seemed to stretch into infinity. Finally, Cymix spoke again, but the arrogant harmonics had been replaced by something closer to wonder. The specimen? Echo, how did it achieve these patterns? By being allowed to grow, to learn, to be itself, Dr. Blackwood answered. Sometimes the greatest discoveries come from embracing what you were trying to engineer away. Echo stepped forward, projecting one final image. A vision of crystalline beings of all forms and resonances, working together to create symphonies of energy that made the previous hierarchy harmonics seem like simple chimes in comparison. The future, Diana realized, watching hope dawn in the faces of her crew. Echo wasn't showing them what could be, it was showing them what would be if they were brave enough to embrace change. Now they just had to convince the hierarchy to take that first step into uncertainty, into imperfection, into growth. The ultimatum. The conference room aboard the Starweaver crackled with tension. High Resonator Cymix's crystalline form dominated one end of the table, flanked by two hierarchy advisors whose surfaces rippled with barely contained energy. At the other end, Commander Diana Wells sat with Captain Marcus of the Dauntless and Captain Chen of the Endeavor. Echo remained close to Diana, its glow subdued but steady. Your demonstration was intriguing, Cymix admitted, each word sending harmonic ripples through the room. But it does not change the fundamental laws of our society. The specimen must be returned. The specimen has a name, Captain Marcus interjected, his weathered face stern. And more importantly, rights under Federation law. Cymix's surface darkened. You speak of laws while threatening us with military force. We speak of protection, Diana corrected, which became necessary when you threatened a Federation vessel, but we're not here to fight High Resonator. We're here to offer an opportunity. One of Cymix's advisors suddenly shifted color, their crystalline surface fragmenting into patterns remarkably similar to Echo's. The High Resonator turned sharply, but not before Diana caught the meaning. There were others in the hierarchy who questioned their rigid standards of perfection. Commander Wells, the advisor spoke, their harmonics less controlled than Cymix's. I am secondary resonator lyrics. May I examine the patterns Echo displayed earlier? Before Cymix could object, Echo stepped forward. The conference room filled with shimmering holographic displays showing the adaptive resonance patterns. But this time, Echo added something new: historical data from the hierarchy's own archives, showing how their pursuit of crystalline perfection had actually reduced the diversity of their energy signatures over centuries. This is sedition, Cymix thundered, but Captain Chen raised a hand. This is evolution, she countered. Your own records show your society is stagnating. Echo represents a path forward. Lieutenant Patel chose that moment to enter with new data. Commander, we've completed our analysis of Echo's genetic structure. It wasn't a mutation or a flaw in the engineering process. Echo's imperfect matrix was a deliberate design by someone within the hierarchy. The reaction was immediate. Cymix's form went rigid, while Lyrics and the other advisor seemed to pulse with recognition. Echo projected a new image, a crystalline scientist, working in secret, deliberately introducing variations into the genetic templates. Resonator Vix, Lyrics whispered. She theorized that our pursuit of perfection was leading us toward extinction, that without adaptive capabilities, our civilization would eventually fail to survive cosmic changes. The advisor's surface rippled with emotion. She disappeared 3 cycles ago. She was terminated, Cymix stated flatly. Her theories threatened the harmony of... They threatened your control, Diana interrupted, standing. But they didn't die with her. Echo is living proof that she was right, and I suspect. She looked meaningfully at Lyrics and the other advisor, that there are others who share her vision. The tension in the room reached a breaking point. Echo suddenly moved to the center of the table, its form expanding with brilliant light. The crystalline child projected not just data this time, but a vision, a future where the hierarchy's rigid structures had left them unable to adapt to a changing universe, contrasted with another future where diversity and adaptation had led to unprecedented achievements. Enough, Cymex's voice shattered several glasses on the table. You ask us to abandon millennia of tradition, of proven methods. We ask you to grow, Captain Marcus stated quietly. To recognize that perfection isn't a fixed point but a journey of constant improvement. Echo isn't just one child high resonator, it's your people's future. Lyrics and the other advisor moved away from Cymex, their forms resonating with Echo's frequencies. The secondary council must hear of this, Lyrics declared. There are others, many others, who have seen the signs of stagnation, who have questioned in secret. You would defy my authority. Cymex's form pulsed with dangerous energy. No, Lyrics replied calmly. We would save our people. The question, High Resonator, is whether you will help us or stand in the way of our survival. Diana watched as Echo approached Cymex, projecting one final image, the High Resonator's own genetic structure, showing signs of degradation that their rigid engineering couldn't address. But within the display, Echo demonstrated how adaptive resonance could prevent the deterioration. You're dying, Diana said softly. Your whole society is, not from imperfection but from the fear of it. Echo isn't just offering your people a future, it's offering you one personally. The conference room fell silent as Cymex stared at the evidence of their own mortality. The choice now laid before them was clear. Cling to the ideology of perfect uniformity and face extinction, or embrace change and survive. The fate of not just Echo, but an entire civilization, hung in the balance of the High Resonator's next words. Legacy of compassion. 1 year later, Commander Diana Wells stood at the observation deck of the newly established Resonance Academy, watching as crystalline beings of various shapes and patterns moved through the halls below. Echo, now nearly twice its original size, hovered beside her, its surface shimmering with pride as they observed the latest group of students learning to explore their unique frequencies. Hard to believe it's only been a year, Lieutenant Patel remarked, joining them at the window. Sometimes I still expect to wake up and find ourselves facing down those hierarchy warships. Diana smiled, remembering the tense moments after Cymex's decision. The High Resonator's surrender to change hadn't been immediate or easy, but facing the evidence of their civilization's impending collapse had finally broken through centuries of rigid thinking. Ambassador Lyrix's transport is approaching, Lieutenant Joe's voice came through the comm. The former secondary resonator had become the face of the reformed hierarchy, working tirelessly to implement the changes Echo had inspired. In the Academy's main hall, a group of young crystalline beings practiced manipulating energy fields under Echo's guidance. Their forms weren't uniform anymore. Each student's unique pattern contributed to the harmonious whole, creating symphonies of light and energy that would have been impossible under the old system. Commander, Dr. Blackwood called from her research station, you'll want to see this, the latest data from the deep space surveys. Diana approached the display, Echo flowing beside her. The screen showed a series of anomalies at the edge of known spatial distortions that would have been lethal to the old, rigid crystalline forms. But the new adaptive resonance patterns Echo had helped develop made it possible for the hierarchy to safely explore these phenomena. They've already established 3 research outposts in regions that were considered impossible to survive in, Dr. Blackwood explained. Echo's imperfect matrix turned out to be perfectly adapted for these new frontiers. The chamber's doors opened, admitting Ambassador Lyrics along with a surprising companion, High Resonator Cymex, their once rigid form now displaying subtle variations that would have been unthinkable in the past. Commander Wells, Cymex greeted, their harmonics warmer than Diana remembered. The Council has reviewed the Academy's progress. Our Echo has exceeded all expectations. Echo pulsed with pleasure, projecting images of its first days aboard the Starweaver. The fear, the uncertainty, and finally the acceptance that had changed everything. Diana felt the familiar surge of pride in how far they'd all come. The council has also approved the expansion program, Lyrics announced. We've identified 11 more research facilities where children like Echo were. They paused, stored rather than terminated. With your help, we hope to awaken them and offer them places here at the Academy. You'll have whatever support you need, Diana assured them. She turned to Echo, who was already projecting plans for new teaching methodologies adapted to each potential student's unique patterns. Cymix moved to the window, watching the students below. I spent centuries believing that perfection meant uniformity. That strength came from maintaining absolute standards. They turned to face Diana. It took human compassion to show us that true perfection lies in diversity, in the ability to change and grow. A sudden burst of light drew their attention. Echo had gathered its students into a circular formation, their combined energies creating a dazzling display of interconnected patterns. Each being contributed its unique frequency, forming a harmony far more complex and beautiful than anything the old hierarchy had achieved through enforced uniformity. Remarkable, Patel breathed. They're not just recreating Echo's patterns, they're creating entirely new ones. Because we gave them the freedom to try, Diana said. To fail, to learn, to discover their own paths to harmony. Ambassador Lyrics's form rippled with emotion. The old stories speak of a time when our people could sing with the stars themselves. We thought those tales were merely myths, but now, they gestured to the students below. Perhaps we were not meant to perfect a single note, but to learn all the songs the universe has to teach us. As if in response, Echo initiated a new sequence, leading its students in a demonstration of adaptive resonance that filled the academy with sheets of living light. Diana recognized the pattern. It was the same one Echo had shown them that day in the conference room, but now evolved, refined, reaching toward possibilities even Echo hadn't imagined then. Your Echo, Cymix observed, has become more than a teacher. It has become a bridge between what we were and what we can become. Diana watched as her once frightened refugee confidently guided the next generation of crystalline beings toward their own unique potentials. No, she corrected gently. Echo simply showed us all what we already knew in our hearts, that sometimes the most perfect thing we can be is imperfect, growing, learning, alive. Outside the Academy's windows, the stars glittered in the void, each one different, each one necessary to make the galaxy whole. Just as Echo had once found sanctuary aboard the Starweaver, countless others would now find their own paths to harmony, guided not by rigid rules of perfection, but by the simple truth that every being's unique resonance added something vital to the universal song. The legacy of a single act of compassion had transformed not just one child's fate, but the future of an entire civilization. And somewhere out there, Diana knew, other changes were waiting to be born, other songs waiting to be sung, in the endless dance of imperfection and growth that made the universe itself perfect in its own wonderful, unpredictable way.